Well, welcome everybody once again to the Thursday evening training. Tonight I want to talk to you about Boiler Plus. And this is really driven by the fact that we get quite a lot of calls through on our technical helpline with people unsure as to what complies of our current range with Boiler Plus. So the real purpose of tonight is to try and tidy that up so that you've got the confidence to go in and know that what you're fitting complies with the latest legislation. But also it's really about how we manage the customer as well, because obviously a lot of customers are not aware of Boiler Plus and they will have an idea about what sort of control they want, and it's really how we manage their expectations to ensure that they get what they want, or if that's not possible, how we sort of help them to make or to come to the decision of the control they end up with, or whatever else they need to do in order to comply if we're not complying through the controls. So I've got a brief slide deck here that I will share with you. And essentially, for those that don't know what Boiler Plus is, if you do know already, I apologise for this bit. I just want to be absolutely sure that everybody knows really what Boiler Plus involves. Boiler Plus is essentially an amendment that was made in 2018 to Part L of the building regs. Now, we've all been familiar with Part L of the building regs, which is essentially the conservation of fuel and energy within a dwelling. So that's the legislation that covers that. And from our point of view, it's always really meant that we needed to have time and temperature controls on our boilers, but we also needed to have a boiler interlock. So that's how I really are most familiar with Part L of the building regs. But in 2018, this amendment for Boiler Plus mandated for combi boilers, at least for gas-powered combi boilers, some extra requirements, and that's what we're going to look at tonight. So let me move on to the next slide. So, like I say, it's a mandatory minimum standard for all new gas combination boilers that are fitted, but it is also the recommended minimum standard for all systems. So your S-plan and Y-plan system, you don't have to fit it to that, but it is the recommended minimum standard. And what you tend to find with this is, as they review legislation in the future, what was previously recommended then gets mandated. So it's highly likely that when Boiler Plus is looked at again, they will be saying that the standard that's been required for combi boilers up to now is likely to be required for all systems. So there are 4 categories that we need to comply with: flue gas heat recovery, weather compensation, load compensation, and smart thermostats. Now, you don't need to comply with all of those. You need to ensure that you've got at least one of those if you're installing a combi boiler. So, and what I'm going to do now is we're going to go through and we're going to have a look at each one of these in detail so that you know what they're all about. So, flue gas heat recovery. Now, this as a controls manufacturer, this is the bit that's sort of outside of our domain, because this is something that is fitted to a boiler. It's either within the boiler as standard, or it's a mod that you fit to a boiler. Now, I've got the picture there shows you of a typical sort of flue gas heat recovery unit. But the main principle is here that the waste gas, the heat from the waste gas, is then used to preheat the flow of the water that's leaving the boiler. So we're not just sending that energy from the flue out into the environment. We're trying to recover some of that and use it as a preheat on the water. Now, obviously, from our point of view, there's nothing that we can do. That we've got no offer for that. That's something that you would be looking at with whoever supplies your boiler, either as something that's built in as standard or as a modification. Now, it's worth knowing about this, because you'll see later on, if you get a customer that wants to retain their existing controls, or are adamant that they only want to have the simplest of controls on the system, then this is perhaps something that you could look at. Generally, they're more expensive boilers that are compatible with flue gas heat recovery. But again, it's a conversation that you can have with the customer to say that, fair enough, you want the simplest form of controls. You're then not going to be able to fulfill the Boiler Plus requirements through your control system. You would then need to look at what else you can do, which would be, in this case, flue gas heat recovery. Next up is weather compensation, and again, this is something that is sort of grounded in the boiler predominantly. We do it in some of our other controls like 𝘁𝗍𝗱𝗲, but we don't have a standalone weather compensator. But you can do it via the data service on 𝘁𝗍𝗲, so you can get it from the cloud data on 𝘁𝗍𝗱. But again, generally, it's something that is something that connects directly to the boiler, and you end up looking at a chart like this. And basically, what you're doing is you're picking the curve that most suits the user, which is the temperature offset between what it's doing outside and what the flow temperature of the boiler is. So obviously, you've got the boiler thermostat, or the boiler stat on the boiler that sets the temperature. The weather compensator will then offset this based on whatever curve it is that you choose. And you look through your boiler manufacturer, and they'll have all these charts in there, and you pick the one that's most suited to your application. If you don't do it through the boiler, you would do it with an external control like 𝘁𝗍𝗱𝗲, where we've got the data that's beamed in based on the postcode. You use that weather data, and then that modulates. So we're not actually controlling flow temperature there unless you're using OpenTherm. If you're doing it on relay control, you're just chopping it up and calling the boiler on for a defined period based on a constant setting on the boiler thermostat. So you can do it with external controls, but a lot of the time that's also in the boiler. Now we come on to load compensation, which is essentially the same as the weather compensation, but instead of looking at outside temperature, you're looking at inside temperature. So what the essence of load compensation is that the control will respond to its environment. So it will learn how quickly the envelope, the room, or the zone gains or loses heat. That data is stored, and the control is then able to calculate how long the boiler needs to run in a specific time based on a requested set point. So we've talked a lot about the relay control in the past, where if you remember for 𝘁𝗍𝗱𝗲, it's oil, gas, and electric, and you get different cycle rates per each one of those. So that's based on your load compensation. If you've got, say, 10% demand, that could equate to, say, 1 minute in every 10 for the boiler to run. So we're not impacting on flow temperature, because we can't if we're just using relay control on the back plate. But we modulate it then via time. Now, if you use the OpenTherm connection on 𝘁𝗍𝗱𝗲, you will actually then impact what the flow temperature is. So that's essentially what load compensation is. It's looking, rather than just having a thermostat that arbitrarily comes on and off and on and off based as temperature fluctuates. Load compensation, there is some intelligence in the thermostat so that it knows when to bring it on and for how long it needs to come on, based on what it's seeing at real time, but also the historical data as well. And I'll show you in a minute how our digistats do that, and how you can get in and change some of the parameters on that. And the last one is the smart thermostat with automation and optimization, and that's really the key for this. It's not just about having a device that you can access through an app on your phone. It's really trying to get some automation into the process. So you know about our eco mode and comfort mode. We've got these modes on 𝘁𝗍𝗱𝗲, which allow you to change the on and off times automatically based on weather data or the learnt behavior of the thermostat, the learnt temperatures in the envelope. But you've also got things like Alexa and IFTTT. If you remember, with 𝘁𝗍𝗱𝗲, you can set up a routine where if the last person in your group leaves, Alexa, stop. That's the problem if you've got an Alexa in the room and you start talking about it. But for IFTTT, remember, you can set up these routines where you have when the last person in a group leaves the house or leaves a particular geographic location, you can have the control drop into away mode, and then when any one of the group comes back, the heating goes back to normal. So it's all about not heating when you don't need to be. So the smart element is really the fact that we can get some automation into the process. So that's really the four tiers or the 4 requirements defined to comply with those, you need to have any one of them. Now, what's the upshot of this really for the customer, and why is it there? Well, it really comes back to this statistic that I've shown you before, which is that 80% of your home's energy is used for heating and hot water. So a huge amount of your energy is used for that purpose. So by taking these steps, by knocking off a few percentage points here and there, that actually equates to quite a lot of your total energy demand. So that's really the motivation for why it's there. And to translate that into some figures, these are official figures from BEMA. So if you fit an advanced room thermostat, that is a thermostat that's got load compensation in it. So the difference between just having a standard on-off thermostat to one that's got load compensation, you're looking at about a 15% saving. Also, it's good guidance that TRVs are on every radiator, and if you do that, that's a further 18% saving. It's not actually mandated, but it is recommended that you have TRVs on every radiator, obviously except your bypass, or it's always good practice to install an auto bypass valve as well. And finally, the smart controls give you up to a 6% saving. So just by the automation of only heating when you need to, even with something that's just a room thermostat, so we're not talking about the smart radiator thermostats, this is just your standard room stat. By going smart, you immediately embrace a 6% saving. So it's well worth doing this, and obviously you may find that you get some resistance from your customers because if they're used to just having a straightforward up and down thermostat, you're now going in saying to them, look, I can't fit that unless we do some other some other solution like flue gas heat recovery. These are really good figures that you can use to sell it to your customer, because there are some really good savings to be had there. So in terms of our product range, where does that leave us? Well, obviously the days of having an LP and an RTS, let me just collapse that slide deck. The days where you just have a single channel time switch and a dial thermostat are gone if you're looking to comply with Boiler Plus from the control side. If you get through flue gas heat recovery or you've got a weather compensator on your boiler, then you absolutely can still use these. But again, it's a conversation to be had with the customer that you can't just use these and do nothing else to the boiler. So if the customer is adamant that they don't want to have flue gas heat recovery or a weather compensator, then we need to look at the controls. The simplest way that we can make our controls compliant is to remove the RTS, anything from the RTS range, and replace it with a Digistat Plus. So you remember the Digistat Plus, we also do the Digistat Plus RF. So if you want to go wireless, you could potentially sell it as an upgrade where you can move your room stat around. But ultimately, we've got the LP doing our timing, so there's no change there. But we've now got the Digistat Plus, which is going to be doing our temperature. And the reason that complies, I'll show you actually now. I've got a small video here. Let me share that with you. Let me get that back to the start. So so with the Digistat Plus, you can get into the installer menu. So if you press and hold the set button, keep it held in. First menu you come to is the program menu, which is essentially setting your high and low limits. But then you get to the installer mode, and you can see here you've got installation type, so you can choose between gas and oil. Now remember, the control doesn't really care what fuel you're burning. This is really just down to the cycling that we've talked about before, how often the control cycles on in an hour. For gas, it's 6 times. For oil, it's 3. So you can just get in and choose and tailor it to suit the application. So that's in your type, and then you've got your system type, which you can choose between fast and slow. So if you've got an installation where it more or less hits set point within an hour, then you would set that as a fast system. If for instance, it's an installation where you've got, say, vaulted ceilings, so the ceilings have been taken down, so you've just got like a vaulted roof, you've got a big airspace to heat, and maybe the radiators aren't sized quite correctly, you can set that to a slow system, and that's generally a system that doesn't hit set point within the first hour. So but you can see these are all functions that you haven't got with a standard RTS room thermostat. So that's really your most basic way of becoming compliant. If you want to carry on using a separate time control and a separate temperature control, that's an easy swap out. And like I say, there is a wireless option as well if you want to go down that route. So the next way is for a combi boiler, and this is probably the most common that we see, is to fit one of the programmable room thermostats. And again, we've got the RF variants as well, but ultimately it's the same principle where it's one unit and you do your timing and temperatures all on the same unit. And again, these have got the optimal start or the delayed start. And again, I'll go back to this video and I'll show you this, that when we look at this is going to comply for me. So with these, you can get into the installer mode. So a lot of you might not know this, but from the auto mode, if you press and hold the left and the plus, you get into the installer mode, and you can see here, if I just pause that these are the parameters that you can change when you're in installer mode. So option number 6 there, you can see you've got the delayed start, the energy saving feature, which again, that feeds into load compensation in so much as the control is looking at what the surroundings are like and making a decision on how long the boiler needs to run based on that. And this, again, you've got system compatibility at the end, and you've also got the application type again, which is your oil, gas, or electric, and again changing your cycle rate. So you can see the reason that these comply with Boiler Plus is because you're able to go in there and to start with, the system, the control is looking at its surroundings and making decisions based on that. But you've also got the capability to be able to go in and tweak it and change it to suit your application. So you can see you just scroll through with your left hand or your right hand arrow key, or you can go left and right to move through the menus, and then you make your changes using the plus and minus. And the thing to remember with these is whenever you make a change using the plus or minus, you must press the right hand arrow key afterwards to lock in the change. So we just changed that parameter, press the right hand arrow key, that saves it, and then to get out of that menu, you can go in and you can press your plus and minus. Now, don't confuse these with the user options. I'm sort of just showing you the other back menu here on these, that if you press left and right, this takes you into your user options. Again, there's things in there. It's more sort of talking about how you do your programming, but it's just to be aware there are 2 back menus on here. There are the user options, which is left and right, both pressed together and held in. But to get in and actually make changes to the cycle rate and the application type, you need to be using the left-hand arrow key and the plus. Now, other thing to remember is these are different depending on whether you're looking at a wired or an RF model. So here we go. That was a Digistat Plus 3, the previous one, a battery version, a 2-wire thermostat. This is now the RF version, and you can see it's the same way in. It's left-hand arrow key and the plus button to get into your installer options, but the options are different on these. So I always tend to keep the little crib sheet there telling me what they are, tend to keep it on the iPad, and then pick the one depending on which one you're looking at. So +2 and +3, the options are the same when they're wired. The RF versions, those are different for the +2 and +3. So +2 RF and +3 RF have a different installer option, so you can't use the instructions aren't interchangeable on those. And again, to come out, remember to save your changes by pressing the right hand arrow key, and then to come out, you use the left hand and the plus to get you back out. And again, just showing you for completeness, you've also got user options on here. which again, left and right hand arrow keys, press and hold them in. Exactly the same way of going through, though. Use the right hand arrow key to scroll your way through, and then the plus and minus to make any changes. Save any changes with the right hand arrow key, and then minus the left and right both in together to come back out. So that's really how we would comply with the Digistats, and obviously both of those we're looking into. Our compliance is coming through the fact that we've got load compensation. Now that brings me on to Wiser. Now, if you remember all the stuff we talked about with Wiser before, obviously it's a smart control. It's internet connected, so you can control it via your phone. But it's really, like I said, the smart modes and the automation, which is where you get your compliance here. So remember, eco mode, that is essentially optimal stop. So the control, in any case, because it's got the same sort of control algorithms as the Digistats, it will learn how quickly the room gains and loses heat and makes its decisions accordingly. So if you were calling for heat and the call for heat was to say stop at, say, 5 p.m, the control knows that it doesn't need to keep the boiler on until 5 p.m. because you'll overshoot. So basically what we want to get to is at 5 p.m, that's the point where we're going to start to decay away. So it already knows that it can shut off early based on its learnt data. But what eco mode does is it just employs that weather data. So that the postcode that you register when you register Wiser, there will be a stream of weather data, and it will just move that off point. So if it's particularly warm outside, you may find your boiler goes off a few minutes early, and if it's particularly cold, you may find that it just stays on that little bit longer. So it's really just moving the off point around, depending on what the weather conditions are outside. Comfort mode, remember, is optimal start, so it looks at the other side of it, or the other end of the time period. So rather than I'm going to get up at 8 o'clock, I'm going to set my heating to come on at 7:30 so that it's achieved, say, 21 degrees by the time I'm up. With comfort mode enabled, you say I want 21 degrees at this particular time, and then the control works out at what point it needs to come on, so that you don't end up heating. It could be that by, say, 10 to 8 you're up to temperature, so you've come on too soon, you've burnt 10 minutes worth of fuel that you didn't need to. So comfort mode deals with that. The only caveat I would say with that is just got to be a bit careful with what temperatures you set at. So if you move a customer over from a traditional dial thermostat, particularly if it's a bimetal thermostat, which may have a 2 or 3 degree swing on it, just make sure that if you use comfort mode, you are setting a temperature which is sort of reasonable, 19 to 21 degrees. Because if you set a really high temperature, you'll find your boiler comes on earlier than what you expect, because you will actually achieve that temperature within half a degree. So that's, again, we've sort of talked about how you manage that with the customer before, but just something to be aware of, that comfort mode is good as long as you keep an eye on what your set points are and what it is that make sure that's realistic based on the sort of application and the room that you're in, the zone that it's in. And then away mode. So we know about that. Away mode is the blanket temperature that we set across all of our zones. So you essentially set a temperature for all of your zones, and then you can manually turn it on and off from the pane or the pull-up menu on the home screen. But crucially, the big news really with away mode is the integration with IFTTT. The fact that you can set up a routine whereby either you can have it just you, so when you leave the property, the system goes into away mode, or you can have it where if you've got a group set up, that any one of the group, when the last person in that group leaves, the heating goes into away mode, and then when any one of the group returns, it flicks back over into your either manual or auto, depending on what it is what it is you've got set up, how you've got your control set up before away mode is activated. So that really covers all of our product range. By far and away, I mean, The surefire way of compliance is if you were to use something like Wiser, and remember you can get your easiest way is with a thermostat kit where you get the hub and the room stat. So it's a really easy upgrade because it's industry standard backplate, and the scope for that is, you know, even if the customer is not really into the IoT services, it's something that you find that once you've got it, it's something that you really do use a lot. And I mean, we adopted Wiser here quite early. And, you know, my parents are not really of the generation where they're on their phones all the time, but again, now it's so easy for them to be able to control the heating using the app, and we've got the IFTTT set up, so you know we don't have to worry about, oh, did I turn the heating off? We know that if we've left the house, heating is in away mode. So it is really good. And remember, you've got the insights pane on Wiser and the heat report that really gives you the details, and you can really see graphically what's going on with your heating system. So you can really see how these savings start to stack up without really noticing any change to your sort of habits. You know, so we don't think, oh, you know, it's cold now because the heating's not running as much. We've got the same level of comfort that we've always enjoyed. The difference is that when we're not in the property, it's not heating. So there really are some good savings to be had. And like I say, just referring back to Boiler Plus, the whole point of Part L of the building regs is the conservation of fuel and energy, and that's why there is now this focus on what can we do to really drive efficiency with combi boilers. To start with, it's mandatory, but certainly for you can see that it's probably going to come for the rest of the heating systems. So the last thing I'll talk about, and sort of moving off topic now, more on to our competition that we're running. So hopefully now you've seen our Eco Installer 2020 competition, where we want your sustainable stories. So I shared this slide with you last time. Doesn't matter what you're doing. We've had some real creative input through Facebook. One guy's actually created a bee hotel by just drilling some holes in some wood and putting it in his garden, which obviously is a real creative idea. But it doesn't have to be anything as complex as that. It could be that you've just decided to eat less meat, or you've maybe you're sourcing your produce more locally, or even if it's down to just taking your bags to the supermarkets and not buying the carriers, or using a more biodegradable alternative to, say, plastic bags. So it can be anything like that. But what we really want you to do is we want you to tell us about it. So take some photos. We want a small little diary entry just to say, this is what I'm doing. And when you do it, tag it with move the date, because remember, this ties into the Earth Day that we talked about before. So tag it with move the date, and also at Drayton Heating, and you'll be entered into the competition. And there is a £5,000 prize bundle, which includes an eco holiday. You also get a Drayton bundle, some personalised workwear. There's certainly a good reason to enter. So if you haven't done it already, do so. And the winner will be drawn at the end of the month. So this is all about our Sustainable September initiative. So I hope that that's covered a lot of Boiler Plus. It's a bit of a dry subject, and hopefully I've done it justice, and that you haven't all gone to sleep. But that's really it in a nutshell. I would also say, if you're still in any doubt, if you Google Drayton Controls Boiler Plus, that will take you straight to a good resource on our website. You've got the actual amendment from BEMA, so the actual amendment to the building regs that you can read through if you want. It is an 8-page document. I read it just now, and it's a bit hard going, but it's there if you want it. But also we've got our own publications which show you what is and what isn't compliant, or what you need to do to make something compliant. So plenty of resources there. As always, use the website. If you've got any questions, ping them over. I'm looking now to see if there is any questions. Somebody here has asked, Digistat 3 is good. Is there an idiot's guide sheet? There is indeed. I believe we call it a quick start guide, which I think is on our website. But if not, I'll stick it in the comments, make that available. But it is just a quick start guide on how you go through and program it. It's sort of aimed really at the end user. And there's also another one which is the quick commissioning guide. So if you've got a Digistat, an RF variant, there's a quick guide there which will just takes you through step by step how you recommission. And they're obviously all in PDF format as well. So if you want them on your iPad, then or your phone, it's something that's quite good to keep with you when you're on site. And let me have a look and see what if there are any other questions. I'm not seeing. Yeah, so again, there's a comment here that smart equates to convenience, which may mean that you're switching your heating on more, and that is a fair comment. And this is what I always say, particularly with comfort mode, you've got to be careful of. And when you're looking at 𝘁𝗱 does give you efficiency, but it also gives you comfort. And it's a bit of a misconception with the customers where they think, I'm going to buy this and they get all the convenience, but they also think, well, and it's a really efficient product as well. And obviously you don't get both, and you'll never get both, because you can't. You have to strike a balance between comfort and efficiency, and that's really the message that when I'm sort of talking to customers that are prospective customers for 𝘁𝗱, this is the message we've really got to get across, that it's not going to give you both. It gives you the capability for either, and what you really need to do is strike the balance. And one of the ways I say that is get rid of any, if the customers think, oh, I like the house to be at 21 degrees, and that may well be true with their current room thermostat, but you can't just fit 𝘁𝗱 and then stick it to 21 degrees and enable comfort mode, because the reality is that 𝘁𝗱 will be more accurate and it will get you to within half a degree of 21 degrees. Now, if your old stat wasn't achieving that, the customer's going to think, oh, it's brilliant, this new controller, the house is lovely and warm and I'm saving money. But obviously you're not, because you are actually achieving to get the house to that extra temperature. That is going to be costing you more. So we've really got to get the customer to think, we'll go, this is a new control, start at say 19 degrees and move up. And also use the tools like the insights page and the heat report to go through and check when you're actually heating, and cross-check that with your lifestyle. Are you, if you're not using away mode, are there periods of the day where you're heating your home and you're not there? Or similarly, is the temperature that you're choosing for setback, is that low enough? Are you setting back to say 16 degrees and you are actually dropping below that, so the heating is coming on throughout the day? Just by able to graphically see that in the heat report is something that is really useful. But it's an absolutely correct comment to say that smart does it for a start. It means that people, it's something in their psyche. Your heating is on your phone, so you're looking at it, whereas most people may not have, once the timer was set, may have gone to their programmer twice a year to change the time for daylight saving, whereas now it's on the phone. People are going in, they're looking at it, they're tweaking, I can have that room a little bit hotter, a little bit cooler. So yeah, you're absolutely right. It does afford you more comfort as well as efficiency, and it's about striking the balance between them. And again, it comes down to managing the customer's expectation right from the off. So I don't see any other questions, but as always, if you do have any, or for anybody that's watching this when it's not live, still post your questions if you've got any, and we'll be certain to come back to you. I will have a look and see if that Digistat quick start guide is on our website. If not, we'll try and see if we can get it up there, but in the meantime I'll stick it in the comments as well. I'll put it up onto the Drayton Facebook page. So thank you all for joining me. Keep an eye out for the promo video, which normally goes live on a Tuesday, to find out what the next session is going to be about. And similarly, if you've got any suggestions for sessions, anything that you want to see, stick it in the comments and we'll do our best to accommodate that. But I've gone a little long tonight, but I think we'll close it there if nobody else has got anything more.